Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to video game news from Monday, July 8th. Starting later than I would have liked today. What was a big element to that is that yesterday I somehow managed to knock an entire glass of water onto my tablet. Now, I don't use my tablet for much of anything, really just reading, but it is something I still use. So yeah, I probably have broken that and ruined it, and Prime Day is coming up, but I'm not sure I can even really wait let's see, what would it be, 8 days. Plus there are some cheap Chinese ones for $100 anyways, and that's what I'm leaning on getting since I only use it for one thing. Unfortunately, I just am not at a point where I really believe that I can get my Steam Deck to just be a complete replacement in the one use of reading. Like, that is the shame of the roll-up, fold-up screens, is that or perhaps even the projector, the concept of a projector screen, is that technology just really hasn't gotten cheap enough or polished enough to really work. When it comes to reading, I do want a 10.1 or 11-inch screen. I don't want the Steam Deck OLED, which I believe is 7.2 inches. Even if it was 7.8 inches, 7.5 inches, like, it's still just, when you're measuring things diagonally, that is a lot more space. I think I played this off screen and got this pack, which gave me some cards. And with that, I will leave it at that. I did also finish playing Nancy Drew and the Creature of Kapu Island, Kapu Cave, whatever it's called. I think one of two things happened on that game. One being that I bought it on sale because it went on sale cheap for like 99 cents, because it is mixed reviewed, and in fact is one of the fewer mixed reviewed Nancy Drew games of all the available Nancy Drew games that exist. Or B, I somehow did some research and found that this one Nancy Drew had the Hardy Boys in it, which really all that ended up proving or feeling like is that, not really proving it, but it felt like it was supposed to be a Hardy Boys game for the entirety of the experience, and they just gave up on that halfway through. Overall, it's not a good game, in my opinion. I thought at the beginning it was going to be super easy puzzles and baby puzzles for little kids, which would have been fine, but then you get into about the halfway point and they give you an insanely complicated puzzle of filling out a clipboard with scientific observations and information, and that broke me immediately. That was just like way more work than I was willing to do, particularly since there was just a high chance, because you had to count and sort different items, frass is what it was called, and insect parts and seeds, and so if you were even one off, you would never know which one was off. There was no checking or confirmation in the process or auto inputting in the process when you got it right. So yeah, I immediately recognized that that was going to be a nightmare and just looked through a walkthrough. And once I've opened the door to using a walkthrough, I'm going to more than likely lean on it several more times. And so I was fairly quick to then use it in later puzzles couple more times as soon as I ran into any difficulty, and you know, that was probably the right move considering how there's just not much of anything else going on there. There's very little linear story that just gets wrapped up in an info dump at the end. There's very few suspects. Like, let's just see. Think about that for a second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 4 possible suspects in the entire game. And a 5th unnamed but unseen suspect. And really, there's 4 people you interact with, on top of, on a few rare occasions, seeing the Hardy Boys. And you never see Nancy Drew. She's always from a first-person perspective. And at the end, 2 of the possible suspects proved to be guilty. So, in the info dump. So you really aren't running much of a mystery there when it's a 1 out of 4 guess gives you a 50% chance of being right. Yeah. Excuse me as I'm taking an allergy pill. I cannot shake this allergy I'm having. Which inherently that is what is pushing me to the thought of buying a SwitchBot S10 auto mopper vacuum cleaner, and that's gonna be like $700, which is expensive, but not really that expensive when you're talking auto mops at the top of the line. And the SwitchBot itself does something that basically none of the other auto vacuums and auto mops do, in that it is self-cleaning its mop head constantly instead of having to go back to a base station to clean the mop heads, and that it is automatically refilling itself and draining itself for the mop part, leaving only really I think it's 70-day vacuum bag to change once every 70 days. For the vacuuming. But yeah, I was not thrilled with Nancy Drew. Now, inherently, I could see myself buying up to, and this is certainly up to, 2 more Nancy Drew games, and I haven't actually bought any of the more of them. There is a third scenario where nieces, nephews would want Nancy Drew games, or their parents would want them to play Nancy Drew games, or their parents might have nostalgia and want to play them themselves. At that point, that's always on the table, is that with the Steam Family Share, if it really does work at any points, that is reasonable to a certain level. But yeah, I could see myself buying the last of what is the middle era of Nancy Drew games. There's early era dossier style games that I'd played 2 of those before, and those were pretty awful. And in fairness, The Creature of Capu Island was better, I think, than that, in that it was more of a linear story, whereas my vague recollection of the dossier games is it was more of an open world game with a lot more repetition of the mini games. Although, in fairness to that, but the criticism is true for both, because The Creature of Capu Island has a necklace making out of seashell mechanic and fishing mini game that they cram in there, and so I ended up spending, out of what was probably about 7 hours of gameplay, 2.5 hours what felt like it was being spent just fishing, just making necklaces. Yeah. Now, I would say it's probably one of those early Windows 95 games that had not really figured out all the tricks yet to make games super long to sell them by their gameplay hour, but was certainly trying for that. Which, if you were to have scrapped all the fishing minigame, or if you'd scrapped all the minigames nonsense that was just wasting your time, and all the stuff in general in Creature of Caput Cave that was wasting your time, it would be a barely 2-hour experience, which would work nowadays as a mobile game, certainly, if you just had like a cheaply made 2D Android iPhone game. You put perhaps a stamina system in it where you can only go through a certain number of interactions, questioning suspects, accusations per day based on the amount of stamina you built, and then maybe you have some microtransactions to buy more stamina, or you just don't have any microtransactions and you just have ads show up. Every month you could release one free game. 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I'm still in the middle of a medium emergency, and yeah, it's not resolving particularly in the ways we would want. But yeah, I definitely feel like the Nancy Drew games, to get back on track, just were a thing of their times. And see, it just is kind of a weird, different type of game compared to something like Indiana Jones Fate of Atlantis. So like, you never pick up items in Nancy Drew that interact with any other items. You barely get any items at all. There's one point where you see a backpack and you're just storyline stopped from going and looking in the backpack, so you can't play things out of order. And there overall is just not a lot there. But I could see giving it one more chance, in that perhaps there would be an argument that I bought a mixed reviewed, poorer quality Nancy Drew, where if I got the last one to be made in the last series, which was about 2014, so there was basically a point there where in 2014 they gave up the ghost and stopped making Nancy Drew games, and then there's a like 2023 Nancy Drew game, so there was about 9 years there where they didn't try anything. So a significant jump in time gives them a chance for a significant level of improvement, although there isn't really a huge amount of hope that happens, because in all honesty, the Sherlock Holmes games, the Perot games, every other book-based mystery game that I've found is not really improving in quality. I wonder if this isn't perhaps just a case that they spend a little too much on the licenses, even though I suspect Her Interactive actually owns the Nancy Drew license. It still financially may be more expensive. I wouldn't be surprised if Her Interactive is owned as a subsidiary of the publisher that owns the Nancy Drew books, but then the publisher still charges Her Interactive some kind of licensing fee. Well, you could make your own mystery game with new characters if you wanted to, but then if you think about that, there is also just not really a case where that happens either. Like, we don't have any like new games that have mysteries around them that are mystery games first. Weirdly, I guess We Happy Few might be the one game that kind of fits in that aspect, in that there's a mystery around that. BioShock, I guess, technically fits around that, but none of those games feel like mystery games first. They're not well, the mystery games I'm talking about are effectively just first-person point-and-click games, and yeah, while there's a ton of those, and often they are part puzzle, part hidden object, and I guess that's where the industry has found its most success, is to just have cheap games like that sell for $2.99 or so, or 99 cents on Steam. But yeah, Deathloop, I got into a whole mess there with watching a lot of YouTube commentary videos, which is a good thing because it means it's pushing the YouTube algorithm to actually show me other content creators of video game content instead of just nonsense reruns of Taskmaster, which is mostly what I spend most of my day watching on YouTube. way too much time watching reruns of Taskmaster. But yeah, there's a whole element there where things like Deathloop, things like Bioshock all do have mysteries around them, but then they have a much better gameplay mechanic around it. And that certainly is in part why I feel like a Nancy Drew game as a mobile game makes a lot more sense, because it would just be more reading. And now with like potentially AI generative voices being possible, it seems like you could probably just take Nancy Drew books that have already been scanned in and generate voices, generate faces, or asset flip characters very quickly. You could have a mobile Nancy Drew game, or even a PC Nancy Drew game, where fans could submit their own fan fiction versions of stories. You could cycle in 3 or 4 books every month and then cycle them out, and then have microtransactions if you wanted to buy all the books. One of the benefits around Nancy Drew in particular is that I think there is at least 120 Nancy Drew books, so it would be fairly easy to cycle in just 3 and do a whole Game Pass type thought for a free version of a Nancy Drew game, and then have the rest of the books available for purchase or for grinding in some way, to grind, watching ads to unlock a book. Things like that. But yeah, I'm still disappointed as far as, I guess what I'm looking for are first person point and click games that have more object interaction than the Nancy Drew games have had so far. Then also have good writing. And inherently, some of this certainly speaks to just how dominant and how optimized the run and gun gameplay mechanic is overall, in that you are just, you're just used to that. It's a good mechanic. It works pretty good in almost everything. Now, arguably, when you look at We Happy Few, that's an example of how a survival game mechanic doesn't work well at all. And so the rogue-like survival elements in We Happy Few really hurt it. I'm a little surprised they still haven't bothered to just try and mod out all of that mechanics completely. And it definitely leans to my thought that there really should be a company that just makes abridged mods of games. Play this game in an abridged format. Instead, we have remasters, but very rarely are remaster or remake even drastically changing the gameplay mechanics. And very often, remasters and remakes are of good games when the bad games would benefit from it more. Yeah. So today is a Monday overall. So we really shouldn't have too much video game news. My macro is still broken, and after finishing it, to finish my catch-up section here, after finishing Nancy Drew, I started to make YouTube shorts, which I'm having to do more often because of the backup being broken. I'm hoping that my monitors using my old monitor is gonna just last and not cause any problems. It didn't cause any problem playing Nancy Drew, which is not super surprising there. The problem could have happened. Why is this? Why am I hearing a sound effect of a coin flipping? A coin would... Yep. I'm hearing all kinds of sound effects. I don't understand why I'm hearing so many Yu-Gi-Oh sound effects when... Oh, I know what's going on. I've got to find... I've got a YouTube video playing. And I'm hearing the playback through Firefox. Firefox is getting hamstrung by Google's Manifest version 3, which is hamstrung UI Vision, and it has forced me to go and change a lot of my macro. So yeah, theoretically you aren't hearing what I'm hearing. But yeah, Manifest v3 caused UI Vision, and I think there's somewhat lack of ability to program and maintain their own software. It caused them to change the JavaScript interpreter that they're using, which has required me to go back and change a lot of my macros code. In particular, anywhere where I was using the newer let variable description, so it would be like let a equal 10, you have to go back to the old variable description of var a equals 10, and regular expression searches to find out if a certain character is inside of a string are not allowed now in Firefox specifically, which is crazy. So I have to, every match command, every includes command, particularly includes commands in JavaScript, is now requiring a last index of command instead, and so then you have to test if the last index of something in a string is greater than -1, which would be close to it, but that doesn't fix the match command, where you actually want a return of a word starting with like a hashtag if you're trying to collect hashtags, and I haven't even figured out a way to fix that, but that is a minor part of my code too. And inherently, changing my macro at all right now is crazy because none of it is working appropriately, and some of that definitely has to do with just UI Vision. And I filed a complaint on the forum, and they tried to help, but it all boiled down to a person saying, weird, it works for me. Which helps me in no way whatsoever. And that really is one thing that if you are being an administrator, being a moderator or community assistance person, you should never do the "it works for me" excuse, because inherently that is the default excuse that everybody's going to hear and no one is going to be satisfied with. So I see Lemon Lover is back on the chat. It's been a long time since he's posted in the chat saying, how have you been, Rydo? Well, I don't know. When it rains, it pours, I suppose. There, as far as all that goes, because yeah, things have been downhill, and me spilling water on my laptop when I already was planning on buying a expensive RoboVac and a monitor potentially. So one more expensive thing, and just other non-financial, non-YouTube things certainly not going right. Great. It's going bad, I think, for everybody in the world these days, and it usually is going bad for everybody. Lemon Lover also says no mic, maybe, question mark, question mark. So he's probably listening, watching the gameplay when I muted the mic, and that'll be awkward too. I didn't pause the recording during that, so there will just be this long period of silence, but at least you'll see me playing Yu-Gi-Oh! At that point. Did I find the tab I was looking for? I don't think I did. Can I hear it? Well, I'm not going to worry about the tab, I guess, and I'll just move on. So do I have any other catch-up stuff to say as far as what's been going on? Still watching a lot of Warehouse 13, wasting a lot of time there. Started and then fairly quickly lost interest in a couple other things. Yeah, I also need to just probably wrap up this stream fairly quickly. Anyways, so shouldn't spend too much time today playing Yu-Gi-Oh! The Steam Summer Sale is still happening, and the memes around the Steam Summer Sale is still happening. Not really a lot going on otherwise, though, as far as the Steam Summer Sale. Summer Games Done Quick just concluded, but I would also argue that they have kind of lost their relevance. I suppose to get back to how things have been going, I can say though, by hook or by crook, and very possibly more by crook than anything else, I have gained, I think, about 44 new subscribers in the last month, which the speed at which I'm gaining subscribers seems to be going up, and I'm at around 890, so theoretically I could get 110 more subscribers. I'd be at 1,000. I'm still not really where I need to be though as far as watch time, so yeah, you really still wouldn't get into the YouTube Partner Program unless I just had some major success. And watch time could easily drop off as I'm struggling to get my macro struggling to get my macros to work. Lemon Lover is still behind. He goes, if you're talking, I can't hear that. Only game audio. Well, you should be able to hear game audio eventually. I mean, my microphone eventually. Unless I screwed something else up in the multi-track. That is what's getting fairly annoying, is that I've broken far too many things in the past 3 to 6 months. Or I've been too near things that have broken in the past few months. And yeah. Although in fairness, the last 10 years overall, I've just been incredibly lucky about things not breaking. So this may just be everything breaking at the same time, which is not what you want to do, and inherently you want to stagger purchases of items new so that that doesn't happen. But that just does create a scenario where there's always something, and the always something can be as annoying as the once in a decade everything breaks. Which, in fairness, like, I wouldn't be surprised if my air conditioner or water heater broke. They're approaching old enough where that's somewhat reasonable. Yeah. Summer games done quick lost its relevancy just over a longer period of time, in that there was a lot of repetition in the games they cover, and there's just not a lot of new games that have interesting speedruns that have been discovered. I would also argue that speedruns themselves are perhaps just not as intriguing. And that might also be a case where Giant Bomb influenced me a lot more around the speedruns. And now that I'm not listening to Giant Bomb in any way, that might be a thing too. In that the hype may have just died down around speedruns because mainstream video game journalism in general has just died, and their ability to hype things, for me personally, has died down. It is kind of a shame though, because I kind of wish that kind of hype would exist for a newer generation of kids. And I imagine it still does. I imagine there are still 10-year-olds talking to each other, passing along internet rumors that they hear around video games and hyping each other up about games that they see commercials for and things like that. But yeah, premature to activate this, but whatever. But yeah, no longer is it the case that you have the likes of Nintendo Power or other sources like Nintendo Power to hype things. I really should find that tab and close it, because it is streaming video, and that's certainly going to choke my network a little bit. Although nowadays, if I'm having network problems, it almost never seems like it is actually a bandwidth through point issue, and it seems very much like it's always a specific server issue, or my weird ad blocker setup and encrypted DNS setup issues. Let's see. We have a article here. Apex Legend players criticize plans to shake up how the Battle Pass works. There will be 2 $10 Battle Passes per season, and they will only be purchasable with real money. Seems like the fandom of Apex Legends doesn't seem to want that, and I could certainly see why. where you have to pay real money. If I had to pay real money to get the battle passes for Yu-Gi-Oh, then it would be a nail in the coffin, certainly, to just pushing me to finally stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh. A Game Boy Advance shoot-'em-up RPG Sigma Star Saga is coming to modern consoles and PCs in 2025. This is quite the image for a shoot-'em-up, but shoot-'em-ups are kind of notorious for having that kind of stuff. Kind of crazy images that don't really represent what you're seeing much at all in the game. Yeah, I think this will probably be our last Yu-Gi-Oh game for today. Let's see. I have no more 3 characters that I can summon. This might be just a collection of manipulating cards that manipulate things. Zenless Zone Zero has launched with 50 million worldwide downloads. So that's a big number. I think this is probably free to start, at least, as a game, though. So 50 million is an easier number, certainly target. Let's see. What would we want to do? I think the move is probably to summon this, count that as 3, take that. Put that there, I guess. Activate that. Have that attack. Activate that. Way too much to activate here. Wait, let me just see. I think this only lets us destroy face-up cards. Nope. Can destroy face-down cards. Yeah, we'll take that victory, and then that'll be the last we'll play for today. So let's see. Yeah, that got the daily quest done. We're making decent progress with the Game Pass, although I'm not sure that the Game Pass here actually is as easy once you get to the later levels. And certainly, even if I very quickly get to level 50, if I'm not feeling comfortable enough to then purchase the gold version of this with crystals, I will then spend the rest of the time from level 50 to level 100 getting nothing. Although it doesn't really matter, because what you actually are getting from the Game Pass is just crafting points that I never use anyways. The whole economy in this game is pretty broken. Okay, so let's just focus on video game news then. The support studio Tosei posts multiple financial losses after a canceled project. This is kind of a repeated story. We had already kind of known this. This was the co-developer of Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII, Reunion, Paper Mario, Origami King. I think the remake. Maybe the original game too. Target, with Prime Day happening on the 16th and 17th, which you should probably know. You've probably seen the commercials if you were watching Prime Video, because that's basically the only commercial they're running. Or if you're even watching regular TV, you very likely have seen commercials or even possibly YouTube ads. But yeah, with this Prime Day 9-cent sales in July, being, I guess, an argument against like July 4th sales instead, that we are still seeing some competition, small bits of competition from Walmart, Costco, Target. Target is buying a buy two get a third for free, or deal, which is, I suspect, for video games. Amazon also has 3 for the price of 2 offering for video games. Notice too, when you're specifically talking about like console video games, because this and Amazon really aren't going to get you Steam gift cards, which that would be nice, I guess, if you could buy 2 $50 Steam gift cards and get another $50 gift card for free. That would be quite a decent deal. But yeah, since you're just talking console games in particular, it's not like a lot of new console games have released even since January of 2024. It's been an incredibly slow amount of releases this year, and very little worth mentioning and even playing at this point. And not a ton of updates to things. Speaking of updates, one of the things I saw on YouTube is how Control added several DLC elements that I missed as I covered Control when it first came out, and my coverage of Control when it first came out did not really encourage me to want to go back and play any more of it later. And so that is one of the rare examples where I played a game brand new. The only other example really would be what is it called? The Witcher 3. Yeah, that's another example of a game that I tried to play brand new, hoping that that would get me more views. It did not, and in the end it led to me never playing any of the DLC for Witcher 3 also. So I firmly am in the position where I would hope that I don't think I'd ever play a game brand new. I want that complete collection, unless I'm gonna buy a season pass at the beginning of the game, and even then the DLC will still probably be too late. Lemon Lover apparently didn't get to the point where my audio unmuted or and so now he's signing off effectively, which that's a phrase I really should just use, is signing off. Either that or my audio really is messed up. But from my side, I see my audio going up and down on the microphone, and I hear myself, so I don't know what would have gone wrong with the stream. Yeah, I certainly could go through the whole list and just mix and match and see what are really good deals. Most of these deals are not even of the newest games. So, yeah. The best bets that they're pointing out are like Helldivers 2, Stellar Blade, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Tekken 8, and Persona 3 Reload, which are all fairly new games. but I bet they're not really even discounted anymore. So buy 2 get 1 free is effectively 30%, 33%, 33.3% repeating discount if we want to get specific, which isn't a hugely good deal on discounts in general. Maybe it's a good deal on console games because they're a monopoly and only one person is manufacturing those games and they have no competition, but even at that, you usually get a better deal when you find a real good deal. And inherently, if you're a parent buying these games for kids, you might be too late for summer and summer school if you're just trying to keep the kids busy in summer. Giving them back to school video games so that they are distracted right when they're into a new school year doesn't make any sense, and that's assuming your kids even have a summer break and aren't just more year round. And certainly it's probably premature and too early to be thinking about buying Christmas gifts. So unless you have birthdays lined up, and even if I pulled out the chart of who has the most frequent birthdays, I imagine that chart would not line up towards July, where you buying birthday gifts makes sense. There's just no Christmas deals really to happen here. And that's a big problem with Prime Day, is that Prime Day happens now, and then there's just a Black Friday or Prime Day 2 or fall sale, whatever Amazon is calling it now, that also will happen, which is just gonna squeeze you even more squeeze as much money out of you as possible. So there is a very valid argument around buying nothing on Prime Day, because you just know you're going to end up buying a bunch of Christmas presents on Black Friday, and you very well may end up buying less from Amazon, which is probably a good thing, instead of just feeding the beast that is a monopoly of Amazon.com. TT Games here tweeted something which kind of caught my attention, in that TT Games really hasn't done anything lately, or said anything lately, particularly talking about Lego games, considering that new Lego Horizon game is not being made by them. Apparently they did something at the BAFTAs. I'm not sure if they really won an award. BAFTA GD. But yeah, so that's basically all they've been doing here. See, the thing here I'm seeing on my screen is I'm seeing a lot of flickering, just black frame insertion type flickering. That might be a resolution issue, certainly, or a frame rate issue on my old monitor, not staying up with the frame rate on my other monitors, although that really shouldn't be happening anyway. I hope it's not that my oldest TV is breaking. Although buying a new TV, frankly, spending $500 to buy a new TV feels more acceptable to me than spending $200 or $250 to buy a cheap Samsung tablet, particularly that doesn't have a micro SD slot for expansion. Now, the tablet that I have earlier today spent way too much time on, and is really the main reason why I was later to start today than I wanted. It does have this T606 octa-core processor, which is it seems like the low-end cheap Chinese processors on a tablet. So it's a hard justification to get a tablet with a cheap T606 compared to a Snapdragon 2 or something better. That being said, this tablet I'm looking at is also like $89. So at that price, knowing I'm only going to read on it, there is a small, insignificantly small concern that you get a cheap Chinese tablet and it's just rooted and has spyware on it, or that it would never get any updates on the operating system, or that the battery life on it might be really terrible, or the screen might be really terrible, or the processor might be really terrible. So there's a lot of risks I'm taking on that, but you know, I could always send it back. And the irritants here, now we're looking at cats being shown from, this is from 2023. Yeah, TT Games really has not said anything lately. They need to announce a new game, or at least continuously promote Star Wars, the newest Lego Star Wars game, because they have really nothing else to prove that they're still in business, which that is a big concern since AT&T has acquired Warner Brothers Games, and TT Games was a subsidiary, to my understanding, of Warner Brothers Games. The first descendant here is being accused of barely changing Destiny 2 icons. The free-to-play shooter was released last week and seemed to be being received fairly well. Now, inherently, it is an interesting thought as far as who can own a copyright on what, and is there just some level of standardization that might be happening here. Perhaps it's a case of just too many coincidences for one game, but also it might be very hard to say you could own the copyright for anything here. Like the bullets here in particular are going to just be standard depictions of a bullet, and too generic to have a copyright. A circle is not going to have a copyright on it, and multiple circles with little fractal star patterns. I think these all may very well fall on just too generic, even with combinations of things, to have a copyright claim around it. It is in this realm, certainly, though, that complaints of plagiarism really should happen more often by peer pressure than by legal action, because yeah, by the time you have games come out and they're just complete rip-offs of games, those kinds of plagiarists are unabashed plagiarists and are only going to be stopped by legal action, whereas this kind of being heavily influenced by semi-plagiarism might just be a peer pressure warning that the gaming community puts out to say, don't do this again and don't copy this idea. It would be very hard for gamers to come out and say, do just copy ideas. That on the other hand, on this, each of these icons are fairly unique and not just commonplace. It's not just a arrow pointing up to mean press up on the D-pad. It's not just a B button to press B on a controller, which that was another slick deal sale I saw. I think Target had a red Xbox Core controller on sale for $35, which is a pretty decent job if you need another controller for your computer or Xbox. I saw, and this isn't really video game related, a chart of Samurai's logos. They have little symbols that they would have on keychains or on their swords and armor, things like that, for different samurai clans in Japan. And there was at least 2 of them that had kind of generic X-shaped symbols. It would have been interesting, certainly, if the Xbox got one of those samurai clans permission to rebrand itself as being the game console for that samurai clan, or in any way influence, have a skin that looks that way. That may have been maybe perhaps a little too pandering to the Japanese, but I think the Japanese might have enjoyed that quite a bit. Although I'm not 100% sure. It may have been a case also if they picked sides on a samurai clan, then the dozens of other samurai clans or descendants who claim to be of those samurai clans might have been upset, or they might have thought that it was just culturally inappropriate. Generally, when we look at the Assassin's Creed Ninja game that's been announced, I'm seeing a lot of reports that the Japanese are not finding a lot of enthusiasm for that game because it is historically inaccurate to their history and the history they know, as far as the only African samurai to ever exist. Moving on, Gung Ho Entertainment has announced a Disney Pixel RPG for iOS and Android, seemingly to just parallel the Epic Mickey rebrushed re-release. And I don't know if this is a case where things are coming in waves because they all got greenlit by somebody at Disney, or if this is a case where somebody is actively just trying to create over saturation. Now, inherently, something that would be mobile game equivalent to Paper Mario with the Disney characters isn't the worst thought ever. These pictures are not loading. If that's really what this is. And certainly starting free to play makes some sense. So this could be something, but then there is also a decent chance that it's nothing. Noticeably, it does seem like there's going to be multiple Mickeys that you can have in your party, which will be a different feeling, certainly. Kotaku Australia is being shuttered by Pedestrian Group. The Australian media company has been licensing the Kotaku brand, but has decided to rethink its business model. Inherently, Kotaku as a name has been a bad name for the Kotaku website for a very long time here. Perhaps in its earliest of days, Kotaku either was a literal translation of video game otaku. I don't think it really was ever that. Or it made some sense as a made-up title. These days, Kotaku would probably make more sense if it was Korean otaku, which that too probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But yeah, Kotaku has long since been less interested or uninterested in focusing in on Japanese games and Eastern games in general, and Kotaku has notoriously attacked Eastern Japanese games a lot, and Kotaku has much more notoriously just devolved into being run by what we would generally describe as SJWs, who had political agendas that they were cramming into articles instead of actually trying to review or talk about games in any objective way. But that's not even the real Kotaku that's being shut down. That's just an Australian company that was licensing the name. This would be the equivalent of, well, I think it makes sense without me making a comparison, so I'm just not going to bother to make one. Nintendo Switch Sports is adding basketball this week, which they have done a very weird situation with Nintendo Switch Sports. Extremely late to the party and not even having all the sports in it, and just slowly adding content after the fact. It still very much seems to me like they are just trying to shove out all of the Switch content games that are ever going to be made for the Switch fairly quickly here before the next Nintendo console gets announced. Which, the more I see that, the more I feel like the next Nintendo console may just not be backward compatible. At a certain level, I wouldn't be surprised if a online service gets launched on the next Nintendo console that is completely different than Nintendo Switch Online and works in a completely different way. And I also kind of wouldn't be surprised if it is perhaps a download only device that doesn't even have cartridge slots. I also wouldn't be surprised if it is actually more of a traditional TV console. It could also just be something fairly the same. Inherently, if you were to just simplistically draw a line on what has been developed most recently, the Switch Lite, where they get rid of the detachable Joy-Cons, was the last major hardware thing Nintendo created. So look to the Switch Lite, which I saw that it was on sale for like $171 on Slick Deals yesterday or a couple days ago. But not particularly a great deal unless you just absolutely need a backup Switch Lite. But yeah, I would say look to the Switch Lite for the next Nintendo console. It might very well be fairly similar to that. Windows on ARM is not ready for the complexities of PC gaming, according to GameDeveloper.com. I saw Linus Tech Tips do a whole live stream where they were trying out games, and very few of the games actually worked. It is inherently going to be easier to make a compatibility layer in Linux to run what is 686 code, or AMD 64 code is what they, I guess, call it nowadays. Yeah, that's what they call it. Running AMD 64 code on Windows is fairly easy to make a compatible layer to run AMD 64 code on Linux, in the sense that the Windows I'm talking about here would be an AMD 64 processor, compatible instruction set processor, and Linux would have effectively the same kind of processor. When you go to ARM processors, which is a reduced instruction set instead of a complete instruction set processor like AMD 64, you have to make a significantly higher amount of compatibility layer changes there. It's effectively like trying to run a Windows program on a Apple hardware, back when Apple hardware used to have non-Intel processors, or now with M1, M2 chips, again, they're non-AMD 64 compatible processors. The note here is, so far just over 1,300 PC games have been independently tested for compatibilities on Windows on ARM, which includes players and developers. And an OMIDA analyst of the analysis of the subset shows that barely half, 55% of games run smoothly without bugs or glitches. Although half actually might be a fairly good number, because if we were to take that same metric and test all of the games on the Steam Deck, there is almost certainly way less than 55% of games, PC AMD 64 games, run on the Steam Deck. But yeah, Microsoft just doesn't have it within them to care and put enough resources to make Windows on ARM a gaming platform. And that's not really what I think they expect it to be. I expect what they are trying to do is once again a half-hearted attempt to have it's going to be a half-hearted attempt to have the Windows logo, Windows 11, show up on what would otherwise be cheap Chromebooks or cheap tablets. They are trying to not lose ground to the iPad and to a lesser extent Android and Chrome OS, which is now switching to be based off of Android also. But yeah, it definitely isn't something that I see getting fixed anytime soon. What you would basically need is a complete instruction set coprocessor on AMD ARM type devices, which would defeat the purpose for all that. Rogue Company players are being offered in-game currency after the Dr. Disrespect content has been pulled. As far as I've heard, there's been really nothing new to say about Dr. Disrespect. It seems like gamers have generally just come to a consensus that he was guilty enough that trying to defend him was not worth their time, or he seemed guilty enough. I don't know who Dr. Disrespect's fan base really ever was. Anyways, and I imagine he may still have a fan base, but I don't think they're going to be vocal in the overall gaming community. I don't know if they were a majority in the overall gaming community to start with. Multiverse has put out a picture here which caught my eye, in that this is 4th of July, and then you have Harley Quinn in red, white, and blue weird outfit, and I assume this is supposed to be Peacekeeper, but this might be Superman in a red, white, and blue outfit. Both characters really don't look the same, although inherently it makes no sense that Harley Quinn would be celebrating 4th of July at all, or that she would be pro the United States of America, as she is a criminal and a victim of the United States judicial system in her own universe, being set up to be in the Suicide Squad. And Superman, in some of his later comics, really gave up the idea of being United States patriotic in favor of being worldwide patriotic and supporting all countries equally, and not just being more rah-rah the American way. Which, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Anyways, is that you just would not in modern days have Superman be super patriotic. Inherently, if you were talking the 1960s, you might have a Superman comic where the Russians were attacking and Superman was collecting, catching all the missiles from Russia and sending them back to Russia and blowing them back into the Stone Age or something like that. Captain America is definitely the patriotist, and even in that, Captain America stories have often made him less patriotic to the current United States. And that goes back to even like some of the very early Superman movies, where Superman 2, I believe, is collecting all the nuclear missiles from around the world and throwing them into the sun, despite the US government's not wanting that. But yeah, that just feels weird, and it's a great example of how multiverses is in danger of missing the tone or the characterization of characters in favor of just making a Smash Brothers game. And noticeably, in the Smash Brothers games, you tend not to give any real characterization to the characters playing, because it is just a fighting game. Overall, it's just a Smash Brothers clone. But yeah, they probably are just very gung-ho about trying to build an audience. City Skylines console version has been delayed again, this time indefinitely. This certainly is a case when it's a second time or more. You should have pause about supporting or buying a game if they're not meeting their announced dates. It definitely is a case where I'd prefer game companies to just not make announcements if they cannot be 100% certain that they're going to make it. I could see giving a company that is established a reason to be trusted one pass if they delayed one element once, but this has happened multiple times. Meanwhile, there are other things I heard about as far as just how City Skylines was playing on the PC version that was causing consternation anyways. Dawn Trail's launch gave Final Fantasy XIV its biggest player count in 11 years. Despite launch issues, the newest adventures to be another hit for Square Enix. Final Fantasy XIV being the online Final Fantasy game. Embracer's Gothic and Elix studio Piranha Bytes has reportedly closed down. This is from Video Games Chronicle. My macros are broken right now. It's kind of pointless to even try and credit these stories. Two Piranha Byte veterans have also announced their opening of a new studio. Gothic, Risen, and Elix are three games that don't have a large pedigree in my mind. I do recognize Gothic, but the Gothic game I'm thinking of is actually pretty old. And none of this is super surprising. Like, Embracer seems like they will just constantly shut down more and more things as they can't find a way out of their overspending problem, short of rushing the game out, which I don't think they have any game ready to be rushed out. Their best bet would have been to rush out the final Deathsiders game. Darksiders? Yeah, the final Darksiders game. But if they had done that, it probably wouldn't have been particularly good. I don't think the third game was even particularly good. Gran Turismo 7's next update adds a new track and 6 new cars, if you're interested in that. Then we already talked about the pixel RPG for mobile. Weirdly, it does feel like the pixel RPG concept, if you're going to try to have a whole brand of pixel RPG games, could not really come to PC particularly well, because it's just going to look way too pixely on a larger screen. I can't imagine people wanting to watch footage from me of a pixely game like that unless it had major fandom behind it, and Disney might be the one exception. Here's the Summer Games done quick, raising $2.5 million, taking lifetime total beyond $50 million. Here you can see there's still a decent number of people showing up for these events. But then also, how many of these people are actually speedrunners or friends or family of the speedrunners? If every single row here is a group of people, maybe 2/3 or half or a third of these groups are friends, although that's probably true for most events. Anyways, I feel like they've probably changed who shows up in speedruns quite a bit too, and some of the least exciting people are now doing speedruns. Used to be, I think, I think it used to be a lot more interesting as they had sillier, more outspoken speedrunners. Nowadays it's mostly just fairly quiet speedrunners. I'm trying to figure out which one they were actually donating to. The article here only points to who they've donated in the last 14 years, but this year, was it Able Gamers or was it... Nope, it was Doctors Without Borders. It seems like it typically is Doctors Without Borders for the main Summer Games Done Quick. I'd also say these speedrun events lost a lot of their interest in that they have too many events now. They have a Winter Games Done Quick, they have a Femme Fatales promoting women speedrunners, which makes very little sense that a woman speedrunner event is necessary. It seems to me like that's just segregation, when there's really no reason why a woman gamer couldn't just be as good, if not better, at speedrunning than any other gender identifying person. The bigger issue is just how many women gamer of the adult ages actually exist, because there is still a lot of social reasons why women, particularly as they reach adult ages, just do not feel capable of playing as much video games as men of the same ages. And a big part of that is social pressure on women to just accomplish more instead of spending 12 hours a day speedrunning a game. Also, on the other side, women gamers can just be on Twitch and hot tub stream and make way more money than a male streamer speedrunner. Like a Dragon Studio says fans will be surprised by its next game, which is to say basically nothing. X-Defiant producer says players can move on if they're struggling with bugs. Free-to-play shooter was released earlier this year, which that's a weird statement to say, other than they're not likely to fix the bugs. That's a weird thing to say out loud. You want to, as a producer, probably always promise good things, even if you have no intention of actually delivering it. The best response there is, we've heard your concerns and are attempting to address it as soon as possible. Something non-committal, but consoling nonetheless. EA Sports FC 25 is coming in September, it's claimed. And then we don't care about their podcast. Let's see. Sharing the Wanderer, the Mystery Dungeon of Serpent Coil Island's second major content update is now available. This game got a lot of promotion. And yeah, it's got new content, so I guess that justifies more promotion. Piranha Bytes veterans have established an indie developer called Pithead Studio. Noticeably, there's an owl and a bat here, which maybe means that they're hoping to do a Batman game. Although, if I was just to assume the bat means Batman, then I also have to assume the owl means Owlman from the Watchers universe, which that would be interesting. Imagine it doesn't really have anything to do with that, and the significance of the owl and the bat has more to do perhaps with Pittsburgh or Pithead as a name. The UK publisher Quali takes a minority stake in Devolver Digital. Here's that video, so I can finally close it. So now let's look at all the new games on Steam, or at least some of them. Here we have yet another clicker. Here we have a Picture Cross game. Give that a chance. King looks like nothing. Pixel flip doesn't look good enough. Here we have another clicker. At the very least, it would make sense for Steam to say you can't have the word banana in your title once a game called Banana gets in the top 10. A game like this for $10. It's crazy. Way too expensive. Yeah, it certainly would make sense. On the other hand, I guess what? This doesn't even support English. Guess what Valve would claim is that they are doing a grand experiment in a pure, as open market as they possibly can have, to just let the cream rise to the crop. Which I don't know. I really believe that's happening, because it definitely seems to me like it's whoever just gets lucky and gets in early. It doesn't seem to me like it is a case of better clicker games rising to the top. Inherently, if people just wanted to play clicker games and there wasn't a Steam Marketplace scam also included with Banana, then somebody would probably play something like Time Clickers, which has been on Steam for a very long time, or any other game that has been well established as a clicker. Apparently this is an old game. I don't recognize it. Yeah. I'm gonna say no to this. I'm trying to burn through all these fairly quickly. A lot of the games that aren't just clicker clones here are looking particularly low quality. I can't help but wonder if that is because of the summer sale. One of the YouTubers I follow made a game, Game Maker's Toolkit, I believe is his name, and he put the demo out on the Steam Next Fest. And his latest video, which I did not have time to actually look at, does seem to follow up on whether putting his demo on the Steam Next Fest got him a bunch of wish lists that would have potentially gotten him a bunch of sales, assuming his game has even come out yet. His game is kind of a simplistic puzzle magnet game, but it looks good enough. It looks a step above your average game on Steam, and definitely way better than the clicker games. Yeah. Here's an example of, I've dismissed a whole bunch of games, but this pixel game stands out, and so I'm gonna actually make a YouTube short on that. Whereas most of these I am dismissing with wild abandon because there's just no quality here. Gotta say no to that. Shelly Manor, I guess, is now out. Still running into too many games that have you just simulating doing a job. Which, yeah, I'm still not sold on games like that. And occasionally we're still getting these backrooms games. Yeah. And the number of ripoffs for Banana as a clicker game is way, way higher than, say, the number of ripoffs for Control, which honestly I would have preferred if there had been 2 or 3 companies that had really tried to make a single A or double A game that was around the idea of SCPs and Control, one or the other, probably just SCPs in general, and we just don't really get that. We did have every now and then a SCP based game, but they were always seemingly very low quality, very low effort horror games. And in fairness, if you were going to rip off Control, I suspect you probably would do a better job having only one SCP in your game and making that be the focus of your entire experience. I had to open all of these Steam games manually, by the way, myself. So that is another thing that's hurting my macro. And inherently, if I can't get my macro working, then I am going to potentially stop making YouTube shorts. Because if I can't schedule the YouTube shorts via an automated process, it is not worth my time to do it at all, even though it was helping my channel get subscribers. Not really helping my channel get watch time, or really even getting subscribers who are likely to watch the pre-recorded footage, which is my main hope and desire. I think most content creators' main hope and desire. But yeah, the good news is I do think I was able to fix that macro to work well enough. You might see that YouTube Shorts just come out in larger bursts if it's really broken, but overall I don't think it's even going to be that broken. But that was simply a matter of changing my code to the new requirements to get the macro that opens all the news to work. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, because there's just no alternative to make it work when it's not working correctly the way it once was. Moving on, Final Fantasy XIV is reportedly coming to mobile via Tencent. A former LA Noire developer are reportedly working on a new 1940s game. The musician seemingly leaked unannounced projects. I feel like this was updated, though, where it turned out that the music that was leaked may very well have been older stuff that was just left on the cutting room floor. Yeah, the update here says they are working exclusively on projects for Rockstar. They were commissioned some music for local composer for a VR project that we were working on a number of years ago, and between projects is based on a case of LA Noire that did not make the cut, but was more of a tech demo than anything else. We have no idea whether this will ever see the light of day, but we decided to finish this core commission to support a local composer. So they're basically saying this was old stuff that was left on the cutting room floor, and they just paid the musician to support the composer. This is not in any way, and that's kind of a great lie. If it is a lie, it probably isn't, to keep people from suspecting that a new LA Noire game would be made. I don't know why you'd make a new LA Noire game. They're going to struggle just to make GTA 6 a thing and make it stand out from GTA Online. But yeah, you could easily have in GTA 6 a point where you flash back to the 1940s if you wanted to add a sequence like that. But making a new LA Noire game, I think it's unlikely to happen. And if you were going to do it, you probably would make it a much more simplistic game, maybe a mobile game. Get rid of the whole open world aspect and the driving and the sequences, the chase sequences and the find evidence sequences, and just make it much more of something closer to like a Nancy Drew game, really. LA Noire, I guess, also was one of the few AAA games that actually was a mystery game, first and foremost. But even with that, there's a lot of running and driving and shooting elements to make it feel like a regular game. The Steam Summer Sale is still going on. The Steam Deck LSCD sale is still going on. Some of these games I would like to play, but even at $23.99, Atomic Heart is perhaps a little expensive. And the only thing really happening here is just checking out the discovery queue. As far as my chart goes, we can see that the first Descendant is moving upward, whereas Naraka Blade Point is moving downward, and Banana has skyrocketed back up above the charts. We're seeing Apex Legends downward, we're seeing Stardew Valley and Baldur's Gate 3 upward, and then Palworld is falling back down. Destiny 2 is trending downward, I would say. And as far as the 24-hour peak games, First Descendant is now in the 7th spot, and Elden Ring is in the 4th spot. Banana is in the 5th spot, which Banana really is just a stain on these charts to show how having a bunch of bots or encouraging a bunch of people to play a garbage game for the marketplace drops really hurts the gaming community. Well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it only hurts non-gamers so much, but it hurts the charts nonetheless. There's clearly been too much focus put on Banana and way less focus on, say, Battlefield 1 instead, just to pick a random game on the list. Bleach Rebirth of Souls has been announced for the PS4 and 5, Xbox Series and PC. I feel like this is the same game that had already been announced, but now with just some actual screenshots. It does look like it's a fighting game, if I was to guess. Although it's actually, yeah, it's a 3D fighting game. Now, inherently, that will attract the Bleach fans. The 3rd season of the 1,000 Years Blood arc that was supposed, or 1,000 Years Blood War, that's supposed to wrap up the Bleach anime series better than it was wrapped up before, is coming out fairly soon, so this is good timing. But there is that element in that Bleach sword fighting is kind of crazy, and so it's going to be kind of hard to make a fighting game around that. And sword fighting in games has never been fully polished. Gundam Breaker 4 Pac-Man collaboration has been announced with an open network test set for July 18th to the 20th. This is another great example of Bandai Namco just not really caring about their properties well enough, because it does not make any sense for a Gundam crossover to exist with Pac-Man. Pac-Man should be fairly sacrosanct and not changed unless you're really improving things, and Gundam probably should be in its own universe also. Right, so the good news there is that's done everything on that tab. So we should only have a little bit more and then we'll be done for today. We already talked about this. I ran my macro right after the Friday stream to see if it maybe had been fixed, and it wasn't. So I have a few extra things here. This might all be redundant. Like, maybe this is new Elden Ring patch, nerfing Blood Fiend's armor and other popular weapons. Alterna Velvet's Blue Exorcist, another story. Third trailer is available on Gamatsu. Didn't see a lot of Gamatsu articles, but that may just be because it's Monday. We did see some, and we saw enough that maybe we'll double check on Wednesday if we missed things. We very possibly did. Yeah, most of these are kind of older elements, older stories we talked about in the last stream. And then CleanBot 9000. If that is the most recent one, then that means most likely I don't need to look at any of these games. Now, here's your lack of curation here, in that even if you had a basic requirement here, you would not allow a clicker game to just be called cock. Like, just, this isn't even hiding what would be a red flag word that somebody somewhere should be looking at. And that's before you realize that each screenshot here is just a meme number: 69, 420, Leet, 1337, 69, 420, a million, which is, I guess, not a meme for that screenshot. But yeah, even the basic filtering should have said, no, you can't just call your game this. But yeah, inherently anything that is tagged with a clicker should go through a single person whose job is to just make sure clickers are of some level of quality. Yeah, and I think all of these others I've already looked at, so I actually don't have to leave any of these tabs open. Yeah. And I guess that's all I have to do today. Once again, either because there's just less news, probably because my macro is broken, also, but it does just seem like less news in general, and because I'm not pushing it to a full hour plus of Yu-Gi-Oh! I've managed to get this stream to be less than an hour and 45 minutes, which I think that works. I think that helps the watch time, and I think that helps people just stay all the way to the end. Anyways, that's going to be it for this stream and recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.